It is Sunday, the 28th of May, 2017. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church in Montreal, engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. Just finished a half hour's worth of protesting and running video. The video ran out basically as I was in my monologue. I didn't pay too much attention to the time. I knew time was running out on a half-hour running time, and so I, lost, some minutes of my previous monologue. So we'll maybe just backtrack a little bit and say how, this woman walked by. I don't know if it was recorded or not, but I do believe it was. This woman walked by and she sort of said that, the language on my picket signs and possibly also my chalked slogans was, can't remember her exact words. I think she said serious or something like that, but she meant it in the sense that it was, somewhat problematic. So in my right hand it says unsafe sect. Obviously a play on words, obviously a play on the term safe sex, and it does in fact reference clergy sexual misconduct, also known as clergy sexual abuse, committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers. Also hints at sexual misconduct and sexual abuse committed by Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, to say nothing of lay leaders and so on. In my left hand it says Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice sucks you asterisk you. So the word sucks does appear there. And then we have here, Unitarian clergy abuse sucks. So it may be the word sucks that she was sort of questioning. And as I did say in my monologue, which may not have been fully documented, essentially my use of the word sucks is just throwing back that exact same word used against me by Unitarian Universalists back in 2010, certainly 2010, possibly even late 2009, but certainly 2010. Some Unitarian Universalists thought it'd be a good idea to create an attack blog that tried to discredit me and to criticize me and so on. And they titled the blog Rob and Edgar Sucks. So, one of my tactics for dealing with abusive behavior on the part of Unitarian Universalists is to throw their own abusive words back at them. And I think it's actually perfectly legitimate for me to say that certain behaviors, such as clergy abuse of all kinds, both sexual and non-sexual, do in fact suck, as it were, in the general modern colloquial sense of the word. It's basically not a good thing. It's not good. It's problematic. It sucks. And yes, Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice certainly does suck. So I'm not saying any Unitarian Universalist person sucks, although some do, literally, if you know what I mean. And in fact, I do believe that one of the people who is responsible for the creation of the Rob and Edgar Sucks blog is someone who does, quite literally suck. So it's kind of ironic that person would use, what, started out as a homophobic slur to describe yours truly, because that person is a male homosexual himself. Again, I'm not totally 100% sure about this, but I'm like 99.9999% sure that almost 20. Yeah, not bad, eh? They're very stubborn people at this church. They just don't know when to deal responsibly with their problems. They prefer to have me protest than actually clean up their fucked up mess of an act. So you could actually enter into dialogue with me towards settling this, but no, you'd rather just ignore the protests. So that's your problem, not mine. And this is true. Getting back to things, this guy's, another person who's aware that my protest has been going on for quite some time, and mentioned that, sort of shouting out to the president of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, who's waiting out front here, about how long this has been going on. Well, that president of the church, could in fact try to settle the dispute by entering into dialogue with me towards the end of, figuring out, what they need to do in order for me to end my protest. There's certain things that Montreal Unitarians and the Unitarian Universalist Association can do that would bring an end to my protest, because they would be moving towards justice and equity and compassion in human relations, rather than basically being very unjust and very unequitable, unfair, and uncompassionate. So anyhow, but they don't want to, they're just too stubborn. They're more interested in trying to shut down the protests than deal responsibly with the issues that caused me to protest here. And in fact, the president of the church, whose name I can't remember offhand, I believe it's Polish or other Eastern European name. His first name is Stanislaus, but I like to pronounce it Stalinslaus, because he is certainly one of those people who have engaged in trying to hide the truth in a Stalinistic manner. This person has erased my chalk slogans, which makes him totally complicit and even a knowing and willful participant in cover-up and denial of Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, which includes, but is not limited to, such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. Which brings us back to that other anniversary, which I was talking about before the tape ran out, as it were. The other anniversary is May 29th, so that's tomorrow. On May 29th of 2012, the Unitarian Universalist Association's Canadian attorney, Stikeman Elliott Barristers and Solicitors litigation lawyer, Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe, signed his name to an arrogant and aggressive cease and desist demand letter, which, amongst other things, falsely accused me of violating Canada's blasphemy law for allegedly making unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. That's exact words from his cease and desist demand letter. A slightly fuller quote would be, your unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape are defamatory. And he went on to say that, they are so defamatory that they constitute the criminal act of blasphemous libel. And he cited the section of the Canadian Criminal Code in which, blasphemous libel is codified into law, which is section 296, if I remember correctly. So the Unitarian Universal Association in Boston hired a Canadian lawyer to accuse me of blasphemous libel against the Unitarian Universalist religious community for blogging about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. They claimed that my blog posts were unfounded and vicious, which is absolutely not true. They are very, very solidly based on evidence of Unitarian Universalists were actually charged, tried, and convicted of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, and sentenced to jail terms, and did in fact serve time in jail for their sex crimes, although I don't believe either of them served the full sentence that they were sentenced to. I believe Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell was released after spending 4 years in jail of an 8-year jail term. And I believe Richard Buell of First Parish Norwell, I believe he died before completing his prison term. I believe he caught some had some serious illness, and he died, probably in a prison hospital, or, basically, he was still, technically a prisoner, where he in fact died, but he didn't die at home. He was essentially in jail, but he didn't complete his sentence because he died before he could complete. So that's 2 cases, and they were the only 2 cases that I blogged about. I knew about other cases. I still know about other cases. I know even about more cases now than I knew back in 2012, but I only blogged about those 2 cases precisely because the people in question were charged and tried and sentenced and went to jail for their crimes, because I wanted to avoid being accused of slander or libel. I wanted to be very, very solidly backed up with very reliable evidence. There's other less reliable things I can talk about, but I deliberately blog about those 2 specific cases because they had been reported in mainstream news media, and they'd been well covered in the news, or reasonably well covered in the news, so it gave me material that I could quote from and so on. And the whole purpose was to basically make it difficult or impossible, well, not impossible, but let's say foolish for Unitarian Universalists to accuse me of slander or libel when this was very publicly available knowledge. But of course, Unitarian Universalists never cease to amaze me with their foolishness, and it is stunningly foolish to accuse me specifically of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists, particularly if they've been charged, tried, and convicted of such despicable crimes, pedophilia and rape. So that's, tomorrow will mark the 5th anniversary of Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe signing his name to that very problematic cease and desist demand letter. Anywho, we're sort of almost halfway into another half-hour segment of video here. So that's the 2 anniversaries. Yesterday, the 27th of May, is the 30th anniversary of the Unitarian Church of Montreal's building on Simpson Street and Sherbrooke downtown being burned to the ground after the church's transsexual organist Wilhelmina Tiemersma set a fire inside the, I believe, sanctuary area of the church, setting fire to her sheet music and so on, and then leaving it, and it got out of control, and long story short, the whole church, except for the rear hall part of it, was totally destroyed. And in that fire, 2 Montreal firefighters who were fighting the fire were killed when a retaining wall fell on them as they were fighting the fire. And just recently came to my attention that 2 other Montreal firefighters were seriously injured when they jumped off the roof of the church to, I guess, avoid being hit by the wall, or perhaps for other reasons, perhaps the flames were getting too close or something. In fact, I can see a scenario where the falling of the retaining wall, even if it, wasn't going to hit them, it would nonetheless perhaps provoke flammable material, coming up very quickly. So I could see how they might have jumped off to get away from heat and flames and debris and so on. So today, that's the 30th anniversary, was yesterday, and the church's service today is commemorating that. I haven't seen a whole lot of people go in to commemorate, to be honest. It's It's actually a very low turnout today. I've only seen a few people going into the church today, nowhere near the numbers I've seen on other occasions. So I suspect a lot of Montreal Unitarians just aren't terribly interested in commemorating that event. And they're probably not interested in commemorating the event that tomorrow will be the 5th anniversary of, which is the fact that the Unitarian Universalist Association's Canadian attorney, Maître Marc-André Coulombe, signed his name to a cease and desist demand letter that falsely accused me of violating Canada's blasphemy law in legal bullying that was clearly intended to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, to say nothing of certain Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, also known as religious educators, to say nothing of a certain Unitarian Universalist layperson by the name of Richard Buell, who I specifically described as a pedophile rapist in an Emerson Avenger blog post or two, precisely because he was charged, tried, and convicted of committing such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape by forcibly raping very young girls who were somewhere between the ages of 6 and 12 when the rapes took place. And one was a neighbor's daughter. Another one was a female family member who I have reasonable grounds to believe would have been a granddaughter, or possibly a grandniece or something, based on the age differences. You know, he was 50-something, mid-50s, I believe, in terms of, you know, when the rapes took place. And, you know, if the victim was 12 years old, well, you know, just do the math. You know, it's not likely to be one of his own daughters. Although, speaking of that, not in terms of the actual published news